You know, we all make hundreds of decisions a day, from what to have for breakfast to these huge life-changing choices, and we like to think we're being pretty logical about it all. But here's the thing. There's a massive, fascinating gap between how we think we make a choice and how our brain actually gets it done, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into.
So, let me ask you, when you're facing a big decision, do you ever get the feeling that there must be some kind of perfect formula out there? You know, a clear, step-by-step process that'll guarantee you make the absolute best choice? Yeah, most of us do.
The textbook version of decision-making looks something like this, right? It's a super clean, straight line from A to B. You spot a problem, you take a few logical steps, and boom, you've got the perfect solution. It's so neat, so tidy, and for the most part, it's a complete myth.
So this idealized version of making a choice, it actually has a name. It's called the rational model of decision-making. And the key thing to remember is that it describes how managers should decide, not necessarily how they actually do.
This model lays it all out in 4 seemingly simple steps. First, you identify the problem. Second, you brainstorm all the different ways you could solve it. Third, you carefully weigh every option and pick the absolute best one. And finally, you put your plan into action and see how it goes. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
Well, here's the massive if that the whole model rests on. It assumes we can get every piece of information we need, be completely logical and unemotional, and always pick the single best option for the company. But, I mean, come on. We all know the real world is just way, way messier than that.
And that brings us to the good stuff, how we really decide. Because while that rational model is a nice idea, what actually happens when the rubber meets the road? Well, that's where the non-rational models come into play. And this is where you can really see the clash. The rational model imagines this perfect world with complete information. But the real world? It's chaos. Problems are complex, we're always short on time and money, information is incomplete, people want different things, and hey, we're all walking around with our own personal biases. This exact problem led a Nobel Prize-winning economist named Herbert Simon to come up with a brilliant concept he called bounded rationality. It's a simple but really powerful idea. Our ability to be perfectly rational is basically trapped in a box. It's bounded by all the messy constraints of the real world. We just can't be perfect decision-making machines. So, if we can't be perfect, what do we do instead? We tend to rely on 2 main approaches. The first is a great word, satisficing. Instead of searching forever for the absolute best, most optimal solution, we just find one that's good enough. The second is plain old intuition, that gut feeling, that hunch you get from years of experience that just tells you what to do.
But hey, it's not all bad news. We're not just stuck with our limited brains. Modern technology is actually giving us some seriously powerful tools to help push back against those limits and get a little bit closer to that rational ideal.
The big push today is all about evidence-based decision-making. It's exactly what it sounds like, using the best data and evidence you can get your hands on. And a huge piece of this puzzle is learning how to harness the power of artificial intelligence, which can analyze amounts of data that would make a human brain literally melt. AI can help us in a few really cool ways. It can automate all the boring repetitive tasks, freeing up our brain power for bigger thinking. It can analyze incredibly complex data, finding critical patterns that our biased minds would totally miss. And it can even act as an advisor, giving us instant, data-driven insights to help us double-check our gut feelings. Okay, so AI is great, but even with the best AI in the world, we still have to deal with the most complicated variable of all, our own brains. See, our minds are constantly using these little mental shortcuts to get through the day. And while they're usually helpful, sometimes they lead us way down the wrong path. And these are what we call cognitive biases.
Let's start with one of the biggest ones out there, confirmation bias. This is our very human tendency to go looking for proof that we're right, and to conveniently ignore any evidence that suggests we might be wrong.
Just think about your social media feed for a second. The algorithms learn what you like, and then they show you more and more of it. It creates this perfect little echo chamber that just constantly reinforces what you already think. That's confirmation bias on steroids. All right, next up we have the sunk cost bias. You've probably heard this called throwing good money after bad. This is that feeling you get when you've already invested so much time or money or effort into something that you just can't bring yourself to abandon it, even when all the signs are telling you to. This example makes it painfully clear. Imagine you spent $500 on amazing tickets to a Broadway show, but you get there and it's awful.
The acting is bad, the music's giving you a headache. Now, logically, your money is gone. It's a sunk cost. Staying just makes you more miserable. But because of this bias, most of us would just force ourselves to sit through the whole thing anyway.
So, okay, we know we're not perfectly rational, and we know we have all these built-in biases. What in the world can we do about it? Well, the first and most powerful step is self-awareness. It's all about understanding your own personal decision-making style.
A really helpful way to think about this comes down to two things. First, your value orientation. Do you tend to focus more on the task itself or on the people and social side of things? And second, your tolerance for ambiguity. Do you need a lot of structure and clear answers, or are you pretty comfortable with uncertainty?
When you put those two together, you get 4 basic styles. There's the directive style, who is all about action and facts. Then you have the analytical style. They're careful, and they love to have lots of information. The conceptual style relies more on intuition and has a big picture perspective. And finally, the behavioral style is the most people-oriented and really tries to avoid conflict.
So, which one of those sounds the most like you? Most of us have one style that's kind of our default setting, even if we dip into the others sometimes. Just knowing what your go-to tendency is, that's incredibly powerful.
And that's really the whole takeaway here. The point isn't to try and become some perfect decision-making robot. That's impossible. The goal is to understand your own style, to recognize your potential biases, and to use that self-awareness to make smarter, more conscious choices.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Now that you know about the myth of the perfect decision, the reality of your brain's shortcuts, and maybe even your own personal style, how are you going to approach your next big decision differently?